With the forthcoming release of the fake Sheikh on Amazon Prime, it could be a good time to have a look at what one of his bosses, Rebecca Brooks, once said at the Leveson inquiry.
Can I not just ask whether they ever pay the police?
Sorry?
It's just the one element of whether you ever pay the police for information.
Yeah.
We have paid the police for information in the past, and it's been...
And will you do it in the future?
It depends on...
We operate within the code and within the law, and if there's a clear public interest, then within the same holds for private detectives, for subterfuge, for video bags, whatever you want to talk about.
It's illegal for police officers to receive payments.
No, we don't. As I said, within the law.
Indeed, Mahmood himself has bragged about having bent police officers in his pocket. And it's clearly not just Rebecca Brooks who pays the police and has admitted such. Look at this. Mazher Mahmood told Met Investigation back in 2005 his informants included senior officers and bent police officers, which surely gives people a reason to cover things up. Here's a short soundbite of Mahmood at the Leveson inquiry, part 1, where he tries to justify pushing things to the edge. Little did we know at the time that he also hacked phones, drugged people's drinks, heavily spliced and fabricated evidence, as well as being a serial liar.
The public interest is the overriding factor. I've purchased child pornography, for example, which clearly is an illegal act. And that led to a conviction. So yes, there are times when we cross the line, but the overriding factor is the public interest. And I've never been prosecuted so far either for drugs or offences relating from work that I've done.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it's wrong to do that. What I want to explore with you is where do you draw the line? Because this goes straight into the question of when does the end justify the means? Where do you draw the line?
Well, certainly in the example I've just given you, that buying child pornography, clearly the end justifies the means, clearly. And exposing drug dealers, if we buy drugs to expose drug dealers and that's our intention, then clearly the end justifies the means. And does that mean we'd go out to rob a bank to show that banks can be robbed? No, you would not.
Here's former MP Dr. Evan Harris to tell you about Mahmood and his links to phone hacking and other unlawful information gathering.
You will have heard, and it is the case, that News Group have paid a substantial sum in damages to me. Now, why would they pay the former executive director of Hacked Off and someone who spent about 10 years trying to expose them and has been the bane of their lives, or at least a pain in the neck, or they may even have a lower opinion than that? And the reason they've done that is to prevent the allegations I make and others being heard in court. And so they've been prepared to spend millions of pounds, in fact tens of millions of pounds, and now over hundreds of millions of pounds in damages and compensation to people and in legal costs in order to prevent a trial which would cost a lot less. To my mind, that indicates that they cannot tolerate some of the things coming to light that would come to light in a trial. They want to keep those allegations out of court. The way the system works, and this isn't understood, is that if I get an offer more than I can hope to get from the judge, then if I refuse that offer and get less from the judge, then I'm liable for all the costs of the trial. And in a case like that, that would bankrupt me and almost every claimant. That's why people settle, not because they don't want to have a final determination, and not even because they want to take the money that's on offer. The allegations that I make, and there are any number that could be made, include these. That in 2006, it's clear from what I've seen, and I make this point in my statement, that the Sun obtained illegally the itemised home phone bill of my associate and friend Simon Hughes at the time he was running for the Liberal Democrat Party leadership, and outed him against his will as bisexual in an article that was frankly intrusive and homophobic. And we know from disclosure in this case that the editor of The Sun, Rebecca Brooks, knew what the source of the story was, an illegally obtained phone bill. She knew that it had been obtained by a private investigator, and despite that, she sent a series of emails, which we've seen, directing how the story should be run, and forcing Simon Hughes to do an interview in order to get the story written in a nicer way. I don't believe that's an isolated example, it's part of a pattern. And that's what we've seen in this litigation. And my number was one of the numbers on that bill, and that's how I knew I had a claim. When I brought the claim, I found to my horror that for 3.5 days, Mazher Mahmood's surveillance team had been following me in 1998 to try and pin something on me. And if anyone knows Mazher Mahmood's history, you can imagine how worrying and what a close escape that must have been for me, given that so many people who are innocent of anything that he accused them of have gone to prison on the basis of his false stories, his false evidence, and his false statements to the police, the prosecution, and to court. And I was that close. And there are plenty of other people out there who were the victims of him, who clearly had their data obtained by him through phone hacking and other unlawful means. I found that there were hundreds of calls to my mobile phone. Now, much as I'd like to think that I was of interest to the Sun and the News of the World when I was an MP, I was not. Those calls are unexplained, and they've not given a legitimate explanation for those calls. So we say that those were calls to try and get hold of my private information. It's amazing what steps News Group will take to undermine our case with the noise behind me. Worse than that, I found that those calls persisted after I was an MP, while I was working for Hacked Off and with the victims of phone hacking who were giving evidence at the Leveson inquiry. I found that there were calls to my associate Tom Watson that aren't explained, that there were private investigators' invoices showing that illegal activity had been conducted in November 2011 against Hugh Grant, my colleague from Hacked Off, who was giving evidence to the inquiry at that time. So at the time that he was in a high-profile way alleging that it wasn't just the News of the World, the Sun were paying a private investigator to carry out unlawful credit checks against him. And again, that's set out in my statement in open court, and we've seen the evidence. Particularly concerning is that we've seen hundreds of calls to Vince Cable MP, who at the time, when some of those calls took place, in the second half of 2010, was in charge of considering whether to prevent or to more closely scrutinise Rupert Murdoch's bid to gain overall control of B-Sky B. I think that's a huge affront to our democratic process that a cabinet minister and privy councillor, subject to not only those regulation, legal and commercial secrets, but also to security secrets of this country, had his phone listened to, which I believe is the only satisfactory explanation of the hundreds of calls to his phone and the dozens of calls at the time this happened. These have been set out in detail in the particulars of claim of his cabinet colleague Chris Huhne, which is or will shortly be a public document, showing that at the time the bid was launched, there were calls to Vince Cable's phone. At the time that meetings took place with his junior minister, there were calls to his phone, which we say, and this is Vince Cable's view as well, represented phone hacking. Finally, of these allegations, and there are many I could use, it's clear to us, and we say this in the statement in open court, that there was an effort to delete millions of emails from 2011 onwards, after the launch of Operation Wheating. So you have a crime scene, the police are interested in getting the information, the data, the evidence from emails, and during that investigation, millions of emails were deleted. On the knowledge and instruction, we say, of Rebecca Brooks, the Chief Executive of News International, Will Lewis, the General Manager, recently proposed to be a regulator at Ofcom, amazingly enough, their legal director, their IT director, and their legal manager. These are senior people involved in these deletions. One of the things I mentioned in my pleaded case, and I mentioned in the statement in open court, is the only justification that they've given for this deletion is that they heard that there was a data leak, that someone was selling, someone had told them that they knew someone who was selling Rebecca Brooks's email data to Gordon Brown and Tom Watson. And that was the basis they used to do the deletions. But they didn't just change the passwords on their emails, they deleted emails and they scratched the backup tapes. I ask you, if anyone's bank account was compromised, you'd change the password, you wouldn't open your safe and burn the cash in that safe. That's what they did, allegedly as a result of this rumour. I've been told by both Gordon Brown and Tom Watson that is categorically untrue. Finally, I want to state why I'm so aggravated in particular by their conduct. Because I brought my claim when I saw this information. They say that I always knew, because I was an expert on phone hacking, I must have known the Sun were involved, and I must have known the News of the World were targeting me, because I'd been at Leveson inquiry and ran Hacked Off. Well, that means that they say I was wrong to believe their sworn evidence that the Sun wasn't involved, and that the News of the World's activities were restricted to a handful of people on the news desk and a short period of time at the features desk. It's just an impossible position for them to hold, both that the Sun wasn't involved and that I should have known the Sun was involved. They can't have it both ways, and that needs to be exposed. I'm grateful to you for coming today to hear what I have to say, because so much of what I've said simply is not published by many of the newspapers in this country. I should have said, by the way, that I want to thank my legal team for bearing with me during this claim. They tell me that I've been a wonderful client, very well behaved, not trying to do their job for them or in any way interfere with their judgments. And that's Roddy and his team and David Sherborne behind me. And by the serious look on their faces, you can see that they endorse what I've said 100%. Thank you very much.
And in recent years, the evidence has come to light that shows even drug people, including me, indeed one of his former associates, Steve Grayson, has given me a sworn statement to that effect, as you can see here. You can check out more at circusofthemind.net, but here's some things that seem to back up the assertion I've made that I believe my drinks were spiked, more than likely drugged with a GHB style date rape drug to make me more compliant, and that this is something that, having done some research over the past few years, I've discovered was mentioned by loads of people. Now, you can see my grounds of appeal on circusofthemind.net, and also on circusofthemind.net you'll see the video regarding non-disclosure by the CPS and the video regarding the errors with paperwork, the chain of evidence being ridiculous, and the full story behind what went on and what not. Anyway, you'll see my grounds of appeal. One of the things is that, in particular, it is said that Mahmood surreptitiously administered date rape type drugs to his targets in order to inebriate them and render them more susceptible to manipulation. There's other things on there that he messed with evidence, edited it, loads of other things, but we're just talking about the drugs here. And as you can see, there's various other things. Clearly pointing out here that on the 2nd of April, the 3 £1 coins I gave were genuine from my pocket, and the ones on the 9th of April were from a place told to get them from by Mahmood's associates, and they provided the money. You can see that on screen at circusofthemind.net. So, here, as you can see, is the witness statement of Stephen Grayson, 17th of May 2021, in support of my appeal. You can see Stephen Grayson talking about his time working with Mahmood in the BBC Panorama documentary Fake Sheikh Exposed, which again can be seen on circusofthemind.net. This is the bit to look at. I'll leave you to read it. Spiking of drinks. I've been asked what I know about the spiking of drinks. Mazher boasted that he knew a pharmacist who could provide him with a GHB-like drug and that he used it in his social life to seduce, if that is the right word, young women. On occasion, I acted as Mazzy's butler, and I noticed how quickly the girls became disinhibited even after a small amount of drinks. I recall one incident when I strongly suspected that a spiked drink was used in a News of the World sting. This incident took place in a suite at the Savoy. There was a man and a woman. The man was turning over the woman, i.e. he was working with us and betraying the woman, stitching her up. I recall it was something to do with a plan to rob a betting shop, but I am not certain. The woman was not being very forthcoming, and Mazher offered her a drink. Unusually, instead of getting a flunky to serve the drinks, he made it himself and brought it over. Within 15 to 20 minutes, the woman said that she was feeling woozy but was much more talkative. She was later sick in the bathroom. It seemed to me at the time that he had spiked her drink. This is someone who worked with Mahmood closely at one time, now giving me a statement to say that he'd witnessed it occur and that Mahmood bragged about it as well. As you can see, Talisa was left hyper-drunk after a meeting with undercover reporter the fake Sheikh. This is the case that collapsed in 2014. Obviously, the fake Sheikh denied spiking Talisa's drink, but her barrister, Jeremy Dine, did make that assertion in court. As you can see, the reporter denied spiking her drinks, but isn't it odd? As you can see, Jeremy Dine said, "You and Nish spiked her drink, didn't you?" The witness firmly responded, "That being Mahmood, that's absolutely outrageous." Mr. Dine continued to spike her drinks to get her to incriminate herself. Former X Factor judge Talisa broke her quote out. You can see down here it says, when you look, that Salford Crown Court heard that Mahmood spiked her drink. That was in 2014, the case that collapsed and ultimately led to Mahmood being jailed for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. This is, you can find the links to this on circusofthemind.net, and everything you're seeing is on circusofthemind.net, and there's a bit that says, see my past 24 years of research. You go and click on that link and you will get the links to these various newspaper articles and web archives and stuff. And this one, regarding a Dr. Manohar Ranwani, took place in January 1998, okay, the sting, which was before my alleged offence in March 98. And in this, he said he must have been given a drug as he could not recall any discussions. This is a doctor saying he believes he was drugged and he couldn't. This is before my case. So if the drugs were being used as the assertion was made then, it makes sense that they could have also been used on my case, which is backed up by the fact that, you know, he bragged about being able to get such to Steve Grayson. Steve Grayson witnessed such occurring on at least one occasion. You can see this article as I'm said, but I think I must have taken something that blocked my memory. I can only come to the conclusion that I was given some drugs, and this is a doctor saying that. And you can look at that again, as I say, on circusofthemind.net. Also, the Newcastle directors Hall and Shepherd suspected that the team spiked their drinks in order to elicit their indiscretions. An article there, Sunday 9th of May 99. You can find the links on circusofthemind.net by following the link to my 24 years of research to that article where they say they believe that their drinks, when that failed, they suspect Mahmood or else a member of his team spiked their drinks in order to elicit their indiscretions. It's in that article. John Higgins, who rarely drinks, was suspicious of drinks provided to him in 2010. And in the article by Roy Greenslade, you can see that two directors of Newcastle United Club were back to them again, believed the drinks were spiked, and John Higgins, who rarely drinks, was suspicious of drinks provided to him in 2010. The Earl of Ardwick believed his champagne was spiked with a date rape type drug, and that was mentioned, as you can see there, applied with champagne, possibly spiked with the date rape drug Rofinol or similar. Mr. Jones said the paper had been accused in the past of drugging the drinks of others it had targeted, and added there were a number of indications suggesting the same tactic had been used on this occasion. Lawrence Delagio, News of the World, denied spiking his drinks, as they would do, but that was May 1999 when they denied that. It happened before then, so this is all around, you know, not long after my case, and we've had one that predates my case, so, you know, it seems to point to that it was his modus operandi, and that would have also taken place with me. And as you can see, he believes that his drinks were drugged. John Alford, that article, all of these can be accessed by going to circusofthemind.net and clicking on where it says see my past 24 years of research. And mine was, you know, it says here in almost every detail the subterfuge involved mirrors what happened in the Talisa trial case. Same with mine, so it does, as you'll see when you look at all the evidence at circusofthemind.net. As you can see, drinks. Like so many other of Mahmood's victims believed they were spiked, he was asked if he could. Again, I've not yet had the chance to fully, have the evidence, including the statement from Steve Grayson, who used to work with Mahmood, fully heard at the Royal Courts of Justice, because unfortunately in January 2022 they did not give me permission to appeal out of time or to vary my grounds. Hopefully now that it's gone to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, as you can see at circusofthemind.net, they will send it back and then these things can be looked at. The fact that I was drugged, the fact that we've now got receipt proving that unlawful information gathering, phone hacking took place. In fact, I've got statements galore showing his modus operandi of editing tapes, manipulating evidence, lying, entrapment, intimidation and threats behind the scenes, and all the other things that happened to me as detailed at circusofthemind.net. Now check out this clip from BBC Newsnight from the evening in October 2016 when Mahmood was finally jailed for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice.
Here is the fake sheikh in his pomp working for the news of the world. And here he is, bringing down London's burning star John Alford. The actor served 9 months for supplying drugs. Today the boot was on the other foot. Mazher Mahmood got 15 months for perverting the course of justice when yet another showbiz sting, this time against pop star Tulisa, went wrong. Mazher Mahmood was once one of Britain's most feared journalists. Now he's on his way to prison, and it's time for his victims to have their say. These people have one thing in common: their lives were wrecked by the fake sheikh. Stage hypnotist Jonathan Royal says he was stitched up by Mahmood when he got 6 months in prison for giving the reporter fake coins.
I can't describe what it was like from the moment that the judge said, send him down. Your mind plays tricks on you. It was a living nightmare. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. Well, I was put on suicide watch in strange ways. I slept for weeks in prison, fully clothed, scared that what you see in films might happen. People have now started to see that what I've been saying for the past 18.5 years actually is true. The man is a liar.
Another scalp, former world champion boxer Herbie Hyde, who got 22 months for supplying drugs.
Mahmood had so much evidence, so much which he created himself. Like he said, I sent him a text saying that I wrote him a text saying that I've got the cocaine and the match fixing. I cannot spell cocaine. Nevertheless, match fixing. I can't spell them words. Prison, I cried every day. And I thought in prison, I might as well kill myself if I want to put this thing to my family. You know?
Proud of you.
You know what I'm saying?
You're vindicated.
So that was how I felt. I thought I might as well end it.
Another victim, Emma Morgan. Emma, you didn't go to prison. You were a Page 3 girl. What effect did Mazher Mahmood's journalism have on you?
Basically, because of the story that went out about me, I lost my home, I lost my job. It wasn't just a job, it was a career. And a career that I think I would have done very well at, and it would have lasted quite a long time. He stole that from me.
A fourth scalp, John Alford. His career ended in 1999 after Mahmood's sting.
It was very convenient for the police. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act was put in place to protect us from unscrupulous police officers. They had a very, very, very cosy relationship with the press because they can use lies, trickery and deceit to get a story, which they call subterfuge. Very convenient for them, very damning for us.
Their solicitor is calling for an inquiry, and she's damning about the conduct of the Metropolitan Police.
Corrupt.
Corrupt.
Absolute corruption.
Corrupt is a heavy word.
It is, and what was going on was very heavy and very serious, but We have evidence of that. I hope finally people will listen to what these men have been saying all along. And I would stress this, there isn't one of those convictions that Mahmood sustained has not been tainted by his behaviour. Not one.
The reporter's victims plan to sue News UK in the civil courts. Today, the company said they would fight those cases and that Mahmood had led scores of successful investigations during his 25-year career with the company, which had led to the exposure of criminality and wrongdoing.
For the likes of us and the other people that he stung, I certainly don't feel justice has been done, do you?
Not really.
No. No. And as far as not wishing it on my worst enemy, I'm more than happy that Mazher Mahmood is now sat there, quaking in his boots, wondering what's going to happen to him in jail. I'd like to be a fly on the wall.
The question now is, why did the authorities let these people suffer for so long?
Although I, like many others, have been fighting for justice for all fake Sheikh victims for over 25 years now, the fact is it's the past couple of years where the most damning and strong evidence against Mahmood has come to light. Evidence of him drugging people, evidence of him hacking phones and a whole bunch of other things. Here again is Dr. Evan Harris, former MP and fighter for justice for victims of media abuse.
Me and my colleagues spent some time looking at all the articles that had Mazher Mahmood's byline over a long period of time, you know, more than 10 years, more than 15 years, and also talking to people who had worked with him or had been his victims. And from that alone, you can see that his methods were very similar in many of the cases, and they were always corrupt. By that I mean that it looked as if unlawful methods had been used, but also that in almost every case, in fact it was hard to find any case where this wasn't the case, there was entrapment, and what he said was the basis for doing what we call surreptitious filming, which you're allowed to do if you have a valid reason in advance, was never there. There was no valid reason in advance. It was a fishing expedition in almost every case to try and entrap people. That's not what the readers of the News of the World were told, or in his other papers. So it was dishonest in that sense. And we're beginning to find, from the fact that so many people are now bringing claims for hacking, which means listening to voicemail messages and other associated illegality, not just phone hacking, the obtaining of other private data by deception, such as obtaining itemized phone bills to see who was phoning who. We could see from that alone the number of people who are Mazher victims bringing claims that it looks like there's evidence out there that he was involved in that. And we can see actually in the public domain that there are people who he targeted, or where he can see that phone hacking was used through Glenn Mulcair, for example, on some of those stories. Stories written by Mazher Mahmood, the fake sheikh, are the worst kind of journalism. Terrible in terms of their honesty and their legitimacy, and devastating in the effect that it had on innocent people who were normally, about 90%, were not already famous people or powerful. He never punched up, always down, often to people who he accused of working in the sex industry, or people he accused of dealing drugs, who may well have been drug users, may well have been addicts, people with mental health problems, immigrants, asylum seekers, and people here illegally. And he would just take advantage of the fact that he knew that almost all those people didn't have the resources to sue the News of the World, so they could never have any recourse to law, that he could do it with impunity. And the impunity that he had from being untouchable in financial terms was reinforced by the fact that the police were under pressure by him and the News of the World to pursue every nonsense story that he wrote. In some of those cases, ended up being taken to court, and some people were convicted and some of those went to prison. And I can't find very many people at all of the numbers who went to prison who deserved to go to prison. These were miscarriages of justice based on fraudulent techniques, and I would say, and these claimants would allege, and we can see it in the Chulisa case, perjurious evidence given by Mazher Mahmood with the knowledge of the people he worked with on the news desk and the editors and deputy editors of the News of the World at the time. It's appalling. It's a scandal. It's a huge miscarriage of justice, and there ought to be proper investigations into it. And I'm hoping that the fact that some of this is now coming to the civil courts will open this up. A number of the people who had convictions, not every one of Mazher Mahmood's stories were taken seriously by the police, and some that were rejected by the police, having been taken seriously. Others were rejected by the Crown Prosecution Service, and some people were acquitted in high-profile and expensive cases. But for those who were convicted, many of them brought appeals at the time, and they can't bring an appeal again, and therefore their only recourse is through the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is slow. A number of them are bringing hacking claims, and I imagine that if they get admissions or settlements or information to them disclosed in the litigation under the rules of the litigation that they're then able to use with permission of the court in their appeal, that they will be able to go to the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and get justice. A large number of people, a significant number of people, you can see from the public register, are making claims. There are people like Emma Morgan, who was a model at the time, who was treated very badly and accused of things that weren't true, framed. Another person like her called Lisa Bangert, another model, who was treated in this way. Alex Smith, a minor TV personality, who was convicted. He was one of the ones convicted. John Alford, of course, from London's burning. He was convicted, lost his appeal, went to prison, lost his career. He's had a settlement from the News of the World, and he's awaiting a statement in open court, which I think will be an admission. And that will be very significant for many of the other claimants. And there are many others as well who are bringing claims. There's an EastEnders actress called Lucy Speed and her then boyfriend Matthew Claxton, who you can see on the claim register, and a large number of people like that. And these were people who weren't courting fame and weren't involved in the activities they were accused of, and it had a devastating effect on them. And while it's been in many cases 25 years or more, hopefully justice will prevail, and that there's more music that Mazher Mahmood needs to face.
And to top it all, in the past couple of years, it's come to light that the police and the Crown Prosecution Service both knew as far back as 1994 that Mahmood should not be trusted and his evidence should not be allowed into court again. And yet this continued. They turned a blind eye. The big question is, why? It's also come to light that cases in the late 90s, some of them collapsed because basically the fact that they're being spliced and edited, the recordings, was brought into question. So many things coming to light in the past couple of years that there really should be a full public inquiry into this, as I mentioned in this final bit. So, with the forthcoming release on the 26th of September 2023 of Amazon Prime's three-part documentary, The Fake Sheikh, about Rupert Murdoch's disgraced journalist Mazher Mahmood, formerly of the News of the World and The Sun on Sunday, who was sensationally exposed in July 2014 when the trial of British pop star Talisa Kontos-Tavlos collapsed, when it was uncovered that Mahmood and his driver Alan Smith had conspired together to tamper with evidence, and they got charged with conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, and ultimately Mahmood was jailed. But that, remember, he wasn't jailed until 2016, based on a story collapsing in court when the judge Alistair McCreath uncovered Mahmood's lies in 2014. But we can go back to 1994, and it begs the question, did the police, Met Police and the Crown Prosecution Service conspire to cover up Mahmood's activities, and if so, why? I ask that question because there is evidence to prove that in 1994 the police and the Crown Prosecution Service communicated with each other and stated clearly that Mazher Mahmood should not and could not ever be considered to be a witness of truth any further after what they uncovered during a 1994 investigation. Do the maths. 94, 2004, 2014. It took another 20 years till 2014 for a judge to uncover his lies and for ultimately then Mahmood to get jailed in 2016. And yet this is a man who had a long-term history of dishonesty. As Roy Greenslade will tell you, when he was his boss in 1988, at the Times, Mahmood ended up resigning before he could be fired when it was discovered he tampered with computer rooms and information on there so that he could try and cover up his tracks for publishing false information. The key here, though, is that the police and the Crown Prosecution Service both knew in 1994 that Mahmood could not and should not be considered a witness of truth. Now, that's mentioned and alluded to in my grounds of appeal that you can see at circusofthemind.net. But the documents involved are not there, but they because they were disclosed as part of the phone hacking cases going through the High Courts in England. I currently have a case running against News Group newspapers for unlawful information gathering as well. Here's the thing. I've seen those documents, and they definitely knew in 1994, the police and CPS, that Mahmood could not and should not be considered a witness of truth. That was never disclosed to me or any other Mahmood victim, meaning that why not? Why was that covered up? Why weren't we told? You see, the police and the Crown Prosecution Service especially have a duty of care, a legal obligation to disclose anything that may undermine the reliability of evidence or witnesses being used by the prosecution. And at no time did they tell me or any other Mahmood victim from 1994 onwards that they knew in 1994 that he could not and should not be considered a witness of truth. What's really interesting is these documents came out in disclosures of documents released by News Group newspapers to the High Court in the Mittville, the phone hacking, privacy intrusion, so-called phone hacking, it's also unlawful information gathering cases. Which begs the question, why did News Group newspapers have documents of communications between the police and the Crown Prosecution Service? That question aside, the thoughts of could it have been used as compromat, or because Mahmood had bragged about having bent police officers in his pocket in the past, and as we know, Rebecca Wade, aka Brooks, has clearly stated that in the past they have paid police officers for information and leads. So again, I ask why, given that in 1994 the police and the Crown Prosecution Service clearly communicated with each other stating that Mazher Mahmood could no longer and should no longer ever be considered a witness of truth, was that never disclosed to me or any other Mahmood victim after that? Why did they keep relying on his evidence? When you look at it, it becomes even more a stench in the room when you consider that over the years, numerous people made the assertions that they felt their drinks had been drugged or spiked. I didn't become fully aware of that until a number of years ago when I went digging and doing research on the cases of past victims. But the fact is, the courts and CPS would have been aware of that. Why was it always swept under the carpet? It's all very odd indeed. The same as it was swept under the carpet the fact that tapes had been edited and spliced and evidence fabricated. And yet they most certainly knew this from the mid to late 90s when other cases had collapsed because the reliability of Mahmood's recorded evidence was brought into question. So why were these things never mentioned? A massive disclosure failure by the police and the CPS, combined with cover-ups galore, make this one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history that needs to be dealt with. You know, when the Talisa trial collapsed in 2014, the Crown Prosecution Service said they were going to do an investigation into past cases. Now here's the thing, any cases that were in the works awaiting coming to court, which included loads of footballers accused of match fixing, a DJ from Ireland and various other people, all of those were ultimately dropped in 2014 and 2015 because the Crown Prosecution Service said they could no longer rely on Mazher Mahmood as a witness of truth. If that is the case, then why did they not disclose to us that they actually knew that he could not be relied upon as a witness of truth as far back as 1994 when the police and CPS communicated with each other? Had that been disclosed to me and other victims, our cases would likely never have gone to court, or if they had, we'd have never been convicted because the truth would have come out about how we were framed, manipulated and basically lied about massively. The information, circusofthemind.net, and also the link that's above or below this video. Share it please, far and wide. Ask your MP, tell your MP to lobby for Leveson Inquiry Part 2 to be reinstated, because then that would dig into what really went on. It's time to get justice for all the people lied about and their lives ruined by the fake Sheikh Mazher Mahmood.